in our Torah portion, Tetsaveh, which is Exodus chapter 27:20 through 30:10. There's a lot packed into this. I think I'm going to keep it a little short because I'm a bit sick, so I don't want to just go into an uncontrollable coughing fit while I'm doing this. But this was a really enjoyable Torah portion in terms of the different things that I found in it. And so the first thing I want to do is just read verse 2 of chapter 28, which says, "Make sacred vestments for your brother Aaron for dignity and adornment." And that struck me as interesting, as like dignity and adornment. So what does this mean? What do these words mean? Well, if you look up dignity in the Hebrew here, it's kabod, which means weight, actually. So that's the definition of the word. It can also mean glory and honor. Those are actually the primary definitions given to it. But if you look up the meaning of the root, it's weight. And then there's a very interesting statement following that in the Strong's saying, but only figuratively in a good sense. So this is right now just talking about Aaron. The same phraseology is used to describe the purpose for the vestments for his sons later in this portion. And I'm just wondering if the weight implication here of the Hebrew word is the weight of their responsibility and their job as being priests. It's not something to be taken lightly. Later on in Torah, we see that Aaron's two sons do take it lightly by offering fire that wasn't commanded by Yahweh. And so I just find it interesting that perhaps this is what the meaning is here, the weight of their office. In Aaron's case as high priest, which is even more serious than his sons, which are just regular priests. Now, the meaning for the word adornment, the Hebrew word is tiphorah, which means beauty, finery, glorying, honor. And the interesting thing about the word honor is in parentheses here, the Strong says, or nation Israel. Now, if you remember to later in this portion, he actually wears the names of Israel on his shoulders and the shoulder pieces, and also on the breastplate on the jewels. And so Aaron literally is wearing the nation of Israel on his vestments. And so I find it very interesting that one of the alternative meanings or ways that this word has been used in Scripture is to mean nation Israel. And I don't think that's a coincidence here in this verse. Now, verse 3. It says, "Next you shall instruct all who are skillful, whom I endowed with the gift of skill, to make Aaron's vestments for consecrating him to serve me as priest." And so it's very striking how important these vestments are. The whole point of them is to consecrate him as priest. So the clothing is incredibly important here. Not totally sure why. So I've heard some teaching about it. That's interesting and thought-provoking, but I just heard that this morning, and I haven't had a chance to really hear alternative opinions or study it in Scripture myself. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear what they've heard. But the word consecrating here is kadash, which means set apart, prepare, or dedicate. And we are called to be set apart as well unto Yahweh. And of course, Aaron was set apart as high priest to serve and do the sacrifices and essentially keep the altar clean and the Israelites clean so that Yahweh could dwell in their presence and they could dwell in his presence. Now I want to go on to verses 9 and 10, and this is where we start talking about the names of Israel and how Aaron's going to wear them. It says, "Take 2 lazuli stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel. 6 of their names on the one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone in the order of their birth. On the 2 stones you shall make seal engravings, the work of a lapidary, of the names of the sons of Israel." And now, what this is really making me think about, first when I hear the stones, this automatically makes me think about the new stone that we will get at the end of days, or the stone with a new name on it. That can be found in Revelation 2, verse 17. I'm just going to read it. And what it says is, "He that has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him that is victorious will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white counter," or stone, it's counter in my translation, and upon the counter a new name written, which no one knows but he that receives it. And we've already discussed in detail names and the meaning of names and how it's more than just a name, but it's also somebody's character. And we see here already Aaron is wearing the names of Israel that are engraved in stone. But the other interesting thing is in the next verse, it's talking about seal engravings. And this really made me think about how we're sealed unto Yahweh as well. That's a repetitive theme throughout Scripture. It also shows up in Revelation. This time, a couple chapters later, chapter 7, verse 3, it says, hurt not the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our Elohim on their foreheads. And I want you to remember this forehead thing because it comes up later in this Torah portion as well. But what's very interesting is if you look up the meaning around this verbiage here, it's not just a seal, it's a seal engraving, which could also be seen as a signet or a signet ring. Now, Joseph, when he finally came out of prison, because he interpreted Pharaoh's dream and essentially told him how to save the nation in the oncoming famine, Pharaoh gave him his signet ring, and with that, all the power and authority of himself. In fact, Pharaoh was the only person higher than Joseph, and that really is what the signet represents. It's a personal signature, or interestingly enough, a symbol of family heritage. And so these names being engraved like signets on these jewels that Aaron is going to wear on the breastplate, it's the family heritage, it's the personal signature, and he wears that before Yahweh. And I just love the verbiage here. It's so beautiful. It says, Aaron shall carry upon his 2 shoulder pieces. Let's read a little further up. Attach the 2 stones to the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones for remembrance of the Israelite people, whose names Aaron shall carry upon his 2 shoulder pieces for remembrance before Yahweh. And now, excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Okay, it's not coming. So a little bit later in the chapter, in verse 30, now we're talking about the breastpiece. And it says, in the side of the breastpiece of decision, you shall place the Urim and the Tumim, so that they are over Aaron's heart when he comes before Yahweh. Thus Aaron shall carry the instrument of decision for the Israelites over his heart before Yahweh at all times. And I found this interesting, that with the shoulder pieces, you have the engraving in, it's just one type of stone, a lazuli stone. But in the breastplate, where the names are engraved, you have 12 different jewels. And this made me think back to some verses that I've heard in the past before, talking about us as Yahweh's jewels. And so the first one is in Malachi chapter 3, which is the last chapter of the book. It's a short book. Verse 16, in this vein, have those who revere Yahweh been talking to one another. Yahweh has heard and noted it, and a scroll of remembrance has been written at his behest concerning those who revere Yahweh and esteem his name. And on the day that I am preparing, said Yahweh Sabaoth, they shall be my treasured possession. I will be tender toward them, as a man is tender toward a son who administers to him. Okay, I must have wrote it down wrong. Or it's possible that the King James Version is different from the JPS. That happens sometimes. There are verses that don't exist in JPS that do in King James. But I can't find it here. And that's my fault. I didn't read it before I turned to it. But Zechariah 9:16, I did definitely read this one. So I know it's there. So let's go there. On Zechariah 9:16, it says, Yahweh their Elohim shall prosper them on that day. He shall pasture his people like sheep. They shall be like crown jewels glittering on his soil. And so this idea of jewels and the children of Israel, or the sons of Israel, being like jewels on the breastplate, really nicely connects to that as well in this other verbiage. So verses 29 through 30, I have a note here, read. I think I actually already read them. I think I just went ahead, but I'm going to read them again. And this is talking about the breastplate. Now here it is. Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel on the breastplate of decision over his heart when he enters the sanctuary. for remembrance before Yahweh at all times. And now the Malachi verse didn't actually have the jewels in it, but it did have this idea of remembrance before Yahweh. And this is significant. And we have this type of verbiage earlier when we're talking about the Passover as well. It should be a remembrance for all time, etc., etc. So what does this mean? And the Hebrew word is zakar. And it's interesting here. It's a primitive root. And Strong says that it properly to mark. So as to be recognized, that is to remember. And so it's this entire theme of being marked, being sealed. This signet indicates which family you're a part of. We're part of Yahweh's family. And so it's just this entire theme is coming full circle here, and I think it's really, really beautiful. Now, verse 36 is something else that is also has connotations, prophetic connotations to the future as well. And it says, you shall make a frontlet of pure gold and engrave on it the seal inscription, holy to Yahweh. And this is what Aaron wears on the headdress, so it falls on the forehead. And what it says later in verse 38, it says, it shall be on his forehead at all times to win acceptance for them before Yahweh. And this makes me think of the Shema when it talks about Torah and the law of our Father. His commandments shall be as frontlets between our eyes. And here we see that there is so Torah, essentially, let's think about this. Let's break this down. Torah is what helps us to lead a holy, set-apart life. It makes us set apart unto Yahweh because they're his laws and his rules. They're essentially if you're going to be in covenant, that's what you do, because that's just the guidelines for the covenant. And so I find it very interesting when it's talking about how Torah should be as frontlets between our eyes. Torah sets us apart as holy unto Yahweh, or set apart unto Yahweh. And we see here what Aaron has written hanging as a frontlet is holy unto Yahweh. And so you can see the connection there. What I also find very significant is that it says that it shall be on his forehead at all times, so that he can win acceptance for them, the Israelites, before Yahweh. And it indicates that, the way I read it is that if he's not wearing that, then he's not getting acceptance for the Israelites in front of Yahweh. And what does acceptance mean in this sense? The Hebrew word is ratzon, and it means pleasure, delight, or favor. So we are his treasured people. He will delight in us. We're a pleasure. We win his favor. That's all. It's not just, we don't just see it in the sanctuary, in the altar, and what the tabernacle was meant to do, but we see it all the way down to the clothing that the priests are wearing. And it all has this singular goal, which we will see again at the very end of this Torah portion. But what happens after this, the scripture talks about how to essentially consecrate Aaron and his sons for this duty that they're going to do. They can't just walk right up and start doing it. They would die, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. And so there's a couple of different offerings that happen. And this happens for 7 days as well. It's not that it's a one-day thing. There's a sin offering first, and this cleanses the altar. Then there's a burnt offering. And then there's another offering, and from this offering, it's the blood that goes on Aaron's and his son's right ears. It also goes on their right big toes. It also goes on the altar. So not only is it used on the human body, but it's used on the altar. And then some of the blood that was placed on the altar is then removed, mixed with oil, and it's put on the clothing that Aaron and his sons will wear. The offering that is used for this is a ram, and it's called the ram of ordination. It is then offered together with unleavened cakes as an elevation offering. So you have all the different offerings that you could possibly have here. The sin offering, the burnt offering, the elevation offering. And so we'll learn a lot more about these offerings in Leviticus, but it's already happening here, right here in Exodus. And it's a prerequisite before Aaron and his sons can even start being priests, so that Yahweh can dwell among us. Now, in chapter 29, verse 34, I'm just going to read this. And what it says is, if any of the flesh of ordination, so they're supposed to eat it. Now, if you remember, this is essentially what happened after Yahweh gave the Torah as well. All the elders of Israel, the 70 elders of Israel, ate a meal with him to seal the covenant. And so in this case, the priests are supposed to eat it. And it's going to be for all time. So that's essentially how the priests got their food, is they're eating specific parts of specific offerings from the Israelites. And so it's talking about this. It says this, if any of the flesh of ordination or any of the bread that is offered with it is left until morning, you shall put what is left to the fire. It shall not be eaten, for it is holy. And this reminded me of Passover. If you remember, if any of it's left over until the morning, you shouldn't eat it. You just have to destroy it in fire. And this is exactly what's happening with his offering here. But now, chapter 30, verse 9. You know what? I'm going to go out of order, okay? Because I want to end on what I think is the most significant part. So chapter 30, verse 9, I have it called out because I feel it's a little bit of foreshadowing to something that's going to happen later in Leviticus chapter 10. And it's talking about the altar of incense. And what Yahweh says is, you shall not offer alien incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a meal offering, neither shall you pour a libation on it. There's a very specific purpose. And when I heard alien incense, it reminded me of Aaron's sons. As you know, they die because they offer, the verbiage in Leviticus is alien fire, but it's incense what they're offering. And if you look up the word alien, essentially what the meaning there is something that wasn't ordained by the Father. If you look further down in the Strong's definition of the usually where the root word is given, it says specifically adultery. I find that very interesting. And so that could be fire or incense that would be offered to a different God, to no God, just something that wasn't ordained by Yahweh. That's the key. And I think that's exactly what was going on when Aaron's sons died. They just were frivolous, in their offering of alien incense. It wasn't something that was ordained by Yahweh, and we have to take this very, very seriously. It's life or death, not just for the priests, but for the Israelites too. But now, here's the point of all of this. It's the same theme that we've been talking about for weeks. Chapter 29. We're going back to chapter 29, verse 45. I'm going to read it. I will abide among the Israelites, and I will be their God, and they shall know that I, Yahweh, am their God, who brought them out from the land of Egypt, that I might abide among them. I, Yahweh, their God. This is the whole point. This is the point of the sanctuary. This is the point of consecrating the priests so that they can cleanse the altar, and also the Israelites, so that we can be in his presence. This is how it was in the beginning with Adam and Eve, and it was sin that ruined that. And ever since then, the whole point is to try to get back to that. This is how it was done for the Israelites when they escaped from Egypt. Now we can recognize Messiah and the power of his work and his blood to consecrate us, to remove our sin so that we can abide in the Father's presence. And at the end of time, we will finally reach that perfect goal again, where we are once more on a clean earth, dwelling in the presence of our God and our Father. And that's just a really exciting thing to think about. And I just love every week digging into the Torah portion and seeing more and more different clues and different connections and different things that tie together this theme. It just really drills it in and just confirms that's what's going on. And this is Yahweh's purpose. So I hope you've enjoyed this Torah portion. Say a little prayer for a quick recovery for me. This cold is not fun. Mainly just the uncontrollable coughing. So it'd be really nice to get rid of that soon. And I hope everybody has a blessed Shabbat and a blessed rest of the week. Shabbat Shalom.